It was a cold winter morning, and Ricardo, a 38-year-old experienced mechanic, was standing in the back of his workshop, hunched over a pile of metal parts. The MAN truck sat in the center of the warehouse, with no engine, just a huge chassis waiting to be completed. The engine, which had been disassembled into several parts, was spread out across a long workbench. To many, this would seem like an impossible puzzle, but to Ricardo, it was just another day at work. He had done this before, but never with such a huge challenge. This particular engine was a complex machine, and the customer, a local farmer, needed the truck ready in 2 days for an important delivery. Ricardo pulled on his worn leather gloves, turned on the light above the workbench, and got to work. The MAN engine was an engineering beast, with over 1,000 individual components, each with its own specific function. He started with the cylinder block, a solid piece of cast steel. Patiently, he installed the pistons, adjusting each one precisely. He knew that any mistake, no matter how small, could result in catastrophic engine failure. As he worked, his mind drifted back to his apprentice days. He remembered his mentor, SEU Jorge, an experienced mechanic who always said, "An engine is not just metal and oil. You have to feel the rhythm of the machine, hear its beat." It was something he had learned to value. With each piece he fitted, he heard the sound of the screws tightening, the gears aligning, and he knew the engine was coming to life. It took hours of meticulous work. The valve trains, the crankshaft, the oil pump, everything was carefully assembled. At each step, he double or triple checked that everything was in the right place. After many hours of assembly, the engine was finally complete. It was a gleaming giant of steel, ready to be installed. With the help of a winch, Ricardo lifted the engine and positioned it on the truck's chassis. It was a delicate task, as one wrong move could cause damage to the frame or the engine itself. With steady hands, he put it in place, connecting the brackets and bolts with precision. Next came the work of connecting the electrical components and the transmission. He carefully followed the technical manual, but often relied on his experience to adjust small details. When the last cable was connected and the engine cover closed, Ricardo stepped back and contemplated his work. The truck, previously inert, now seemed ready to wake up. He wiped his greasy hands and glanced at his watch. It was already night. Time had passed without him noticing, but the silence in the workshop was interrupted by a smile of satisfaction. He walked to the truck's cabin, sat in the driver's seat, and turned the key in the ignition. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence seemed to grow, as if the machine was hesitating. But then, the engine gave a small roar, followed by another, until finally it began to roar steadily and powerfully. The deep sound of the MAN's engine echoed through the workshop, and Ricardo knew, in that instant, that he had done everything right. He got out of the truck, listening to the engine working perfectly, and felt a silent pride take hold of him. It wasn't just about assembling an engine or fixing a truck. It was about creating something with his own hands, bringing to life a machine that would be essential to someone's work. The customer would arrive the next day to pick up the truck, but that night, Ricardo knew he had overcome yet another challenge. He closed the workshop, with the sound of the engine still echoing in his ears, and went home with the certainty that his work was among the best he had ever done. And so, while the MAN truck waited to travel new roads, Ricardo was already thinking about the next challenge. Because for him, each engine was a new story, and each story motivated him to continue. The night was advanced, but Ricardo's work was not truly over. Even with the engine working perfectly, he felt that there was something more to be done. It was the kind of feeling that only those who are passionate about mechanics understand. A restlessness, a desire to do everything with the greatest possible perfection. Ricardo turned off the lights in the workshop, but before he left, he decided to take one last look at the entire truck. He opened the hood, checked the connections one last time, tightened a screw here, adjusted a new one there. He knew it wasn't necessary, but this kind of dedication was what made the difference between a good mechanic and an exceptional one. When he finally walked away, the sky was already beginning to lighten, indicating that dawn was near. Ricardo went into the small office he kept in the back of the workshop, took out his notebook, and scribbled down a few details about the engine assembly. He always liked to document his process, both for future reference and to remember any mistakes or ingenious solutions he had found. The next morning, the farmer, Mr. Almeida, arrived at the workshop early. He was a man with calloused hands, the typical farm worker who depended on sturdy machines to do his job. When he saw the truck finished and the engine humming smoothly, his eyes lit up with satisfaction. "Ricardo, you're a wizard with these engines," exclaimed the farmer, shaking Ricardo's hand firmly. "I thought there wouldn't be enough time, but not only did you finish it, but it looks like the truck is better than before." Ricardo smiled humbly. He never liked to brag. He preferred to let his work speak for itself. "I did the best I could, Mr. Almeida. This engine will last for many kilometers ahead. Just don't forget to change the oil regularly and do the maintenance I recommended." The farmer nodded gratefully and wasted no time. He got into the truck, started it, and once again the engine roared with all the power that Ricardo had carefully calibrated. The farmer walked around the workshop, testing the brakes and gears, before leaving towards his farm. Ricardo stood at the door of the workshop, watching the truck disappear into the distance, raising dust on the dirt road. There was something almost poetic about that moment. The machine he had assembled was now alive, ready to face the challenges of the roads. He felt a deep connection to it all, as if every screw tightened, every component adjusted, was part of something bigger, not just an engine, but a work of precision and dedication.